that came to a close at 28 years old, and I started having some health issues. maybe no wonder. Like half my body just went numb one day, and I couldn't feel like my arms or my legs on one side, and I was convinced I was dying of some incurable neurological disease. And I went in for a whole bunch of tests, and nobody could find anything wrong with me, maybe except my lifestyle. And I think that was a powerful moment for me, because I've been living like I was immortal. And I was really faced with the idea, like, what if I died next month? What would my life have amounted to? What would my legacy be? What would be written on my tombstone? And the answer was, here lies a dude who got 1 million people wasted.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. Hey everyone, today's guest is one of the most inspirational people I've met over the past few years, and his story is going to inspire you in big ways. Scott Harrison is the founder of Charity Water, one of the most successful nonprofits in the world today, in part because of the innovative approach he's taken to building this organization. So Scott, welcome to the Business of Advice. Excited to have you on here today.
Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
So our mutual friend David Bach introduced us years ago, and then he sent me, he said, dude, you've got to read this book. So you wrote a book called Thirst, which is your story, I guess, and truly was blown away by it. So maybe to start, just walk us through your journey from New York City nightclub promoter to raising, I don't know, I think you're approaching now like $1 billion, and you've provided clean water for 15 million people. So it's just it's an inspiring story.
Yeah, well, maybe to back up a little more, I was born in Philadelphia into a middle-class family. And when I was 4, there was this kind of tragic event where there was a carbon monoxide gas leak in our house that went undiscovered. And on New Year's Day, 1980, my mom walks across her bedroom. She crumples to the floor, unconscious, kind of the canary in the coal mine, which then led to the discovery of the leak and, ripping out the furnace later. But my dad and I bounced back with our health, which she never did. So it's interesting. I just kind of made this connection, honestly, recently. But my mom started wearing a mask from the age of when I was 4. So I never really saw her face.
Yep.
So I was very familiar with 3M's family of charcoal masks and N95s. And what happened to her, her immune system just was irreparably destroyed by this gas leak. So she kind of lived in isolation. I grew up as an only child in a caregiver role, doing the cooking, helping my dad, cleaning the house, accompanying mom to doctor's visits, and family of faith. So my parents were, non-denominational Christians, but would credit their faith for, keeping the family together through all this trauma. And, if you'd asked me what I wanted to do growing up, I would have said I'm going to be a doctor so I can cure mom and people like her. Didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't swear, didn't have sex. I was that good kid wearing the Christian school uniform. So then 18 happened, and I moved to New York City. And I pretty much did the opposite of all those things. And I became a club promoter. I figured if I'm going to rebel, I should at least do it in style with vigor. And wound up working at 40 different nightclubs over the next decade, throwing kind of high-end parties for models and celebrities and bankers. And, $25 a cocktail, $1,000 on a bottle of champagne, big lines outside the velvet rope, this kind of obnoxiously exclusive, if you get into the club and spend thousands of dollars on alcohol, then you have found meaning and purpose in your life. So that was really act 2, which lasted 10 years too long. And I picked up all the vices that you would imagine come with the territory. So, 2 to 3 packs a day of Marlboro Reds and lots of drugs, lots of drinking, lots of gambling, pornography, strip clubs. I mean, pretty dark existence where dinner time is at 10, the club is at 12, and then the after hours club is at 5 a.m. That leaves you, stumbling home at noon while other people are on their lunch break, eating salads like from Sweetgreen. So that came to a close at 28 years old, and I started having some health issues. maybe no wonder. Like half my body just went numb one day, and I couldn't feel like my arms or my legs on one side. And I was convinced I was dying of some incurable neurological disease. And I went in for a whole bunch of tests, and nobody could find anything wrong with me, maybe except my lifestyle. And I think that was a powerful moment for me, because I've been living like I was immortal. And I was really faced with the idea, like, what if I died next month? What would my life have amounted to? What would my legacy be? What would be written on my tombstone? And the answer was, here lies a dude who got 1 million people wasted.
Yep.
Is about the most that you could write. And, is that what you want in life, to get 1 million people, drunk and wasted? So I had a really powerful 180 degree turn back towards faith, back towards morality. I sold everything I owned. I quit smoking and drinking and drugs and gambling, and vowed to make my life look radically different. I mean, really, it wasn't a pivot that was needed. It was like do and say and think exactly the opposite of everything that I've been doing for 10 years. And this led me to a really extraordinary volunteer opportunity on a humanitarian medical ship in Liberia, West Africa. And that's really where everything changed, when I walked up the gangway onto this 500-foot hospital ship full of volunteer doctors and surgeons and nurses who were sailing into a country that had just finished a 14-year civil war and had no healthcare system. And I was going to be, my role on this ship was to be the photojournalist, to volunteer and take pictures and tell stories of the important redemptive work that these doctors were going to be doing. And that kind of led to, I guess, Act 3, which that moment was about 17 years ago.
Wow.
I just realized I've been talking a long time.
Yeah, no, man, you're doing great. I asked you to tell the story, and that's part of the story. So, and I even remember in the book, because it was a mercy ship, I think, just you telling some of the things that you see. And I remember the first time my wife and I, was probably 8 years ago, went to the Dominican Republic with a group we support. And it does, man, it changes your life when you see some of those things, right? We in America don't realize, even you watch some of the stupid stuff going on over the past few years and the things that we argue about, and don't realize how great we have it until you go see some of that. So I know this, like, next act was charity water and the start of that. So tell that story.
I mean, the real simple, maybe one moment from that trip, my third day in West Africa, the government had given us a football arena, soccer arena in the center of town, where we would screen and then triage the sick people that came.
Yep.
We had 1,500 available surgery slots to give out, and over 5,000 people were standing in the parking lot waiting for us to open the doors. And I just remember weeping, when we closed the doors and sent 3,000 people home with no hope, with no help. Later learning, Cody, that some of those people had walked for more than a month with their children.
Wow.
They had walked from neighboring countries just trying to get their kids to a doctor because the healthcare system was so broken. And, the next thing that I learned was that the dirty water people were drinking was the root cause of so much of the sickness and the disease that we were seeing. And I learned, half of the country was drinking from unsafe swamps and ponds and muddy, viscous rivers. And half the disease in the country was because people didn't have clean water and access to sanitation and hygiene. So that was really my big, aha moment the second year that I was volunteering. Wow, if we really care about global health, let's just go get people the most basic need to be healthy. Let's get people clean water. And at the time, Cody, there were 1 billion people living worldwide, 1 billion people without clean water. It was 1 out of 6 people alive on planet Earth drinking dirty water every day. And that's the problem. I said, I want to tackle that and see if I can bring that number to 0 before I die.
Well, you're making an impact. So I know you said you've now served over 15 million people. And I'd love for you to one of the things that just struck me with Charity Water and the approach you took is, I guess I would use the word innovative or disruptive. I don't know how I would describe it, but you've never run a nonprofit before. You took this kind of completely different approach. Would you walk us through just the process of starting? I think your first fundraiser was like a birthday party, you kind of disguised that it was a birthday party, to building what you've built today, because this is the thing I love about it. And I heard, and I've just seen you kind of do it in Charity Water, where it's at today versus where you started. I heard John Maxwell say something one time that's just stuck with me. He said, when we start walking, God starts working, right? And he's like, we see where people are at today, but we don't see where they started. And I see this even in the advisors we serve, right? They see the guys that are super successful, but don't see all the work that's gone in along the way. So you start with this birthday party and now have served 15 million people across the world with clean water. Just maybe walk through the innovative approach and how you've tackled this.
Well, maybe this is encouraging to some people out there. I mean, you mentioned this, but I think my lack of experience proved really valuable. I was 30. My only experience had been running around West Africa, following these doctors and seeing needs. And I just came back to New York City, and I knew people who worked at MTV or Chase Bank, or Sephora. And as I was talking to them about this vision to bring clean water to the whole world, I realized there was a huge distrust and skepticism when it came to charities, when it came to giving their money to these institutions. I remember coming across a USA Today poll that found 42% of Americans believe charities waste. 42% of Americans don't trust charities, and 70% of Americans believe charities waste their money. So the first kind of question I had was, well, how would we bring these disenchanted people back to the table of giving? Because my life had been transformed through giving, through this turn towards service. And I wanted other people to experience that joy and that freedom. So really the vision was like, how might we reimagine the charitable experience? How might we reinvent the charitable experience? Charity means love. It's a beautiful, pure word. It's not a word people should be moving away from, or skepticism. It's not a word that should be tainted. It's a beautiful word. It's a beautiful act. It's a virtue. So my first idea was, what if I could promise that 100% of all donations that ever came into the organization would go directly to build water projects that we could prove that gave people clean water. And I would open up a separately audited bank account where all the overhead funding would come from. So kind of two revenue streams, a small group of people to pay for those unsexy overhead costs, the staff salaries and the Epson toner pack and the office rent and the flights, where 100% of the money could go. So that was really the first kind of pillar.
Yep.
And then second, just saying, charities don't do a great job typically of showing people the impact of those donations. So could we use technology like Google Earth and Google Maps and later sensor technology to show people exactly what we had done with their money and the people who were being helped? So I kind of put those two things together. And the only idea I had, this is now 15 years ago, day one of Charity Water, was just to get a nightclub donated, to get open bar donated, and then invite my friends to come. But to get in the club, they had to make a $20 donation. And that night, we collected a modest $15,000. 700 people came through the doors all night. It was a new club that was opening that people just wanted to see. And we immediately took 100% of the 15,000 to northern Uganda, and we did our first well. And then we fixed a couple others. And we then sent the satellite proof, the satellite images of these wells and pictures and video back to the 700 people. And we said, you did this. Here's where your $20 went. And here are the people drinking clean water. And it was so simple. It was like this little mini proof loop that took place in a couple months. But people were so blown away because they had not expected us to tell them where $20 went, to go to any sort of effort. And I remember just saying, let's just keep doing this over and over and over and over again until everybody has clean water. And that if we did this successfully, if we kept 100% of the money going to the field, if we were able to continue showing people impact, that the movement would grow and grow, and we'd have more and more capital to deploy to solve this problem.
A couple things I just want to share with you. So last August, I was involved with the group. We planted a church here in Topeka called Mission Church Topeka, and I literally ripped off your charity water idea. So we're doing the exact same thing. 100% of all the tithing that comes in goes out to missions. Supporting other missions and stuff. And so we've got a few donors who cover all the overhead, because the first time I read that, I'm like, man, that is, what everyone says about charity, what people say about a church, right? Is they just want our money. And being able to tell that story of like, no, we're just giving it all away. Like, we don't want any of it. It's going to go do things. It's just, it's inspired me.
I'm sure you're finding this, but there are people who love paying those behind the scenes overhead costs, as long as you're a good steward of those funds and you're transparent.
They do.
So
100%.
That group of people just wants to know, how are you spending that money?
Yeah.
And they'll continue to give. I mean, today at scale, we raised $100 million last year. 129 families paid all the overhead. So that allows over 1 million donors to have this pure way of giving. We need both.
Yep.
If we just had the 1 million donors given to water projects, we'd go bankrupt. But, those 129 families, Cody, if I tried to put their money in the other side, they'd be disappointed.
Yep.
They really want to hire that next employee, that next water engineer. They want to help the team get out on those airplanes to audit the programmatic quality of the work and the finances of the work. Well, so it's really possible. You just kind of have twice as much work.
Well, and I think that's actually where I was going to go with it. What I love about it is, in a way, you're doing what other charities have done. It's just in how you're telling the story and how you're positioning it, right? Like, every charity has to raise money for operational and overhead expenses, and then the work that they're doing, you've just taken a different approach. And I think one of the things that I've seen in you is that you're a great storyteller. Is that something that you worked on, or was that something that just kind of happened into it? Because I think, just as people listen to this, I think that's one of the things I want them to hear is like, how can you approach, business? Everyone approaches business, especially if you're a financial advisor, in a very similar way, but how can you approach it with a little different mindset of doing something different? So was that intentional? Was that fluky? Was it something that you've perfected over time?
I mean, look, I think we're creatures of story, and, I saw a lot of other organization that they would lead with facts. I mean, if I told you right now, 771 million people don't have access to clean water, and 52% of disease is, right? 4,500 kids die every day between the age of 1 and 5. Like, people just numb out to the numbers. So the stories are so important that draw people into the issue. And they have to be true stories. They can't be hyperbolic, but I think that's the way to, that we have been able to engage people, over so many years. And I mean, Charity Water's made over 1,000 videos now since we started. So even I think the visual language of storytelling is so important. It's one thing for me to tell you about a 7-year-old drinking from a brown viscous river in Kenya and throwing up on her shirt every time she takes a drink. It's another for you to see that, to see that image and put your child, in that place, and, just have it open up your heart in a completely different way. So that has been very intentional. It's part of the language of Charity Water. We hire other storytellers. I'm not the only one doing this. There's a whole team out there that'll go speak to kids or universities or, or companies. And it's very much kind of a language of, let's show what the problem is, but also, one of the things we've been intentional about is this really trying to focus on the hope and the inspiration of the movement. A lot of charities will use guilt and shame to peddle their wares and to raise money. You and I are probably similar ages. We remember the old Sally Struthers commercials, and the kids were all looking in slow motion and with sad eyes, and there was a fly that would land on the child's face, and then the 800 number would come on the bottom of the screen. This worked, but it certainly, it didn't inspire you, right? It didn't make you want to wear the t-shirt or go tell all your friends, hey, we have to get involved in this, this amazing movement. So I think we've tried to emulate brands like Nike or Apple or Virgin, with Nike doesn't tell people that they are overweight and lazy to go buy their shoes and go out for a jog. Nike tells inspirational stories of people overcoming adversity, right? Like someone without legs can go climb a mountain. You can go for a run. Like Nike believes greatness is within people, and then they rise to the occasion. So I think even the way that we tell stories is very intentional. It is with excitement and anticipation, and we're trying to inspire people to what is possible. And then we invite them to become a part of this movement. The great thing about clean water, Cody, is that everybody thinks this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're a Republican, you think this is a good idea. If you're a Democrat, you think this is a good idea. If you're a libertarian or an independent, if you're a person of faith, if faith is anathema to you, regardless of where you stand on, contentious social issues, water is needed for humans to live. It is an inarguable common good. And we've really tried to just invite people to be a part of this movement where the world says, like, not on our watch are people going to die of bad water when we know how to help every human alive. Like, we're not going to go and colonize other planets before we get people on our own planet access to clean water.
Well, a couple of things I just want to maybe circle back to or highlight there. One is this idea of like the inspirational side of it. And I tell, so we work with financial advisors. That's a lot of who listens to this podcast. And I've probably said this on 10 episodes before, but, sometimes I think they forget what they do and how important it is, especially if someone retires. Like our advisors all the time are sitting with someone when they find out, their spouse got diagnosed with cancer and trying to make sure that their money's going to last and what's their life going to look like when their spouse of 40 years is gone, or when they lose the significance of they're retiring from this job. So that just idea, and the thing I tell them, and this is what I wanted to ask you, obviously you've done a great job of getting your donors excited about the mission, right? And involving these stories. What I tell our advisors all the time is you've also got to get your team bought into this idea of what you're doing is a noble profession that is helping people. How have you done that with your team? So is it a very similar approach of just constantly reinforcing those stories, or what do you do maybe to get the team so bought into the mission also?
Well, when we were smaller and pre-COVID, we were taking the entire company to a place where we worked.
Oh, wow.
We would take them to Uganda. We would take them to Ethiopia. As we started to scale, that became just really financially difficult and kind of a business shutdown.
Yeah.
And also a bigger burden on our local partners. So Charity Water works with 44 local organizations across 21 countries. So we've only got about 100 people, in New York and now distributed, but over 1,500 people, locals in each of these countries that are actually on the payroll, working on these projects, working on these Charity Water projects. So a lot of storytelling, and I'll also say that it's difficult. I think, we get together as a company every Monday and we're trying to bring stories of impact. There are teams that travel all the time back and forth to Sierra Leone and India and Bangladesh and Nepal. So we're always trying to force them to make presentations of what they've seen, the impact. Sometimes we'll bring our local partners in to talk to our team about what's happening. And I think while that's the big challenge, the good news is people really want to work for purpose. Mm-hmm. I mean, we hired 31 people over the last 6 months, I think, and 6,600 people fully applied for those jobs, fully applied for 30 jobs. So there is a huge amount of desire out there for people's work to matter. And this is coming at a sacrifice. There's no stock, there's not a big stock plan at Charity Water. Like, you're not going to, see the company get listed on the NASDAQ and hope to make $1 million as an engineer. You're making sacrifices to have your work matter and work for the flourishment of others. And I think the good news is that we're seeing more and more people want to leave those even higher paying corporate jobs to work for purpose.
That's one of the things I think, especially as a small business owner, being able to tie that in. That's why repeat that over and over to our advisors. Being able to show how you're impacting people's lives in a positive way is a big part of getting quality people on your team. You talked there, and just even that idea of hiring 31 people. So as you've grown Charity Water, you had to scale fundraising, marketing, operations around the world. So as you look back, what was the key to scaling, and maybe just as you even had to grow as a leader of the organization from kind of that first one, Uganda, to wells all over the world, and maybe asked a different way? Are there some lessons that you've learned along the way as you've led Charity Water and just seen it grow and scale?
I remember many years ago coming across a post from a very successful venture capitalist that said, really, a CEO only needs to do three things: have a compelling, inspirational vision, hire amazing people, and then keep money in the bank. And basically make sure you don't run out of money.
Yeah.
And, I think the vision is easy for me, right? A world where everybody has clean water to drink, regardless of what situation they were born into. So
pretty clear vision.
We've kept that vision just so simple over time.
Yeah.
If anything, our mission has gotten simpler. What does Charity Water do? We bring clean and safe drinking water to people in need around the world. Like, we have a machine that turns cash into clean drinking water in an effective and transparent, measurable way. So that vision is easy. Hiring great people, I think maybe one of the advantages was I never really developed a network in the nonprofit world. The network that I developed was out in Silicon Valley. So we were hiring out of Google or Twitter or Zynga or Adobe. We kind of had the language of a Silicon Valley startup because that's where a lot of our funding was coming from. And those were the people where I was hanging out with. It was the founders in the early days of, a Shopify or a Spotify or Twitter or Facebook or Pinterest, and talking about culture and talking about scaling and talking about working internationally. All of these people were successful by an order of magnitude greater than Charity Water. So I wasn't really holding myself to the standards of, maybe a big behemoth, well-respected nonprofit who would be happy to grow 10 or 15% a year. These companies were growing like 1,700% a year,
yeah,
2,400% a year. And, with a noble mission like ours, scaling just means more people get clean water. My salary hasn't changed in like 5 years, since we went from raising, 25 million or 100 million each. So it's really all about the output that makes it even more exciting, I think, to scale, because you're not scaling for personal gain, you're scaling for the gain of others. So I've really been challenged with that. I mean, I remember being in a Land Rover with Daniel, who founded Spotify. This is many years ago in Ethiopia. And he said, Scott, we were around like 700,000 Spotify subscribers. And I stood in front of my company and I said, we're going to 100 million paid, and we're going to do it in less than 10 years. And I think it took them 11, but now they're at 180 million, going to 1 billion. So that kind of 100x plus vision I found really compelling. And I didn't find a lot of in the nonprofit sector, just to be honest.
Which is kind of neat. I mean, even as we were talking a little bit before we started, the success that you're having even to start this year off, right? It's that compound effect of having this clear vision and getting people on board, and as it grows. Two other things I just shared there that I think as anyone listens to this that hit me. Having this simple but crystal clear vision is so much easier to get people bought into, right? When it's clear what you're trying to accomplish. That's and then the second thing that hit me, and I've seen it even in our own business as we've scaled, is so many times you look to hire someone who has experience in your space. And I've found that sometimes people that are outside of our industry completely but have skill sets that can help us scale, just bring a whole new perspective to it. So sometimes looking outside of your industry can be really, really important also.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk to our advisors a lot about, and I've kind of heard you talk about this and seen it. We tell them all the time, your best asset is the list of prospective people that you build that you can market to.
Yeah.
You've obviously done a great job of list building and then being able to go market to that list. Is there an approach that you've taken to with list building that you found super effective and then marketing to that list?
It's interesting, Cody. I would say that is one of the things we have not done as well as we should. And had we been better at that, we would be a completely different organization.
Wow.
We would be a lot bigger. We do have a list. It's too small for as long as we've been around. And we just haven't been as intentional as we should be about that. Now, a lot of that is because our ability to reach outside of our list has really worked. We wound up producing a video for our 10th anniversary, that now has like 75 or 80 million views and has been driving a lot of growth. People will watch it, they understand the charity water story, and then they're compelled to give and specifically join our monthly giving community, which is called The Spring.
Yep.
So that drove so much growth. We went from 0 to $24 million in recurring donations, just in a few years, based on the strength of really that video outside. So we were focused more on growing kind of the outside. We had the last time our whole team was together, we had Seth Godin come in, and I remember he put up this screen, this slide on the screen, and he said, "You have all the donors you need to solve the water crisis." And it was really this, you're going out, you're trying to grow the movement, but if you were really perfect stewards of the people you already have, you have enough resources in that group. So it was really challenging and compelling. And since then, and over the last, couple of years, we've really focused more about building the list and more about the journey we can take a supporter on. We just had somebody who made $100 donation in December. We stewarded that, really well as a part of our new kind of intentionality. And then a couple weeks ago, they made a $300,000 donation. So, we've seen that happen before. There was a family that had made a $30,000 donation 7 years ago and, kept in touch with the organization over 7 years, had an exit, gave $10 million.
That's pretty.
So I really am excited by lifetime journey, working with children as they're young, getting them involved, getting these multi-generational families involved. A lot of the kids in their 20s will bring us to their parents or even their grandparents. So, sometimes I have to go and kiss the ring of a G1, kind of an 87-year-old, what is this crazy thing my grandkids want me to, give money to, or trying to tap the foundation. And, and that's always a lot of fun because, we're having a serious business conversation and, often I get to meet, someone who's built an extraordinary business legacy and a philanthropic legacy.
Well, I'll tell you, the spring is what actually made me think you probably did list marketing well, because I remember hearing you tell the story of just how that had really exploded in that monthly giving. Another thing you said, or I guess Seth said to your team that I think so many of the advisors we work with have realized over the last few years, COVID actually, there are all the terrible things about COVID, but I think for business owners, it forced them to rethink how they were marketing their business. And what many of them found is, like I always say, they had diamonds under their feet, right? They had all these existing clients who had more money, that were constantly coming into more money, maybe inheriting, stuff like that, retiring. And they had all these prospective clients that they had not done a great job of staying in touch with, that all of a sudden when your traditional marketing shuts down, live events, stuff like that, you have to go back and work and nurture that group that you already have. You're like, there was a lot of opportunity there that we missed on. So it's
and I think we did a great job of that during COVID. We should have been doing this sooner, but we wound up hosting all of these events for our spring members, for our smallest donors, and like 550 people would, enroll to an online hour with me and the programs team. And we were talking about clean water in the time of COVID and how our projects were functioning around the world. And some of the different scenes of lockdowns in Madagascar and India and Bangladesh and Kenya, right? So they were really, really interested. And, we'd never really thought of using Zoom like that. Like, who would want to come to an hour Zoom call with a charity? And we did dozens of those events, able to really build community, both with our major donors. At the end of 2020, we did an hour Zoom call with those overhead families, and they gave $5 million at the end of the call, just on Zoom, to additional to their pledges and their giving. So, yeah, I think we're really excited about the journey of a family, the journey of a donor, getting to know us better, getting to know the issue better, stewarding them, thanking them, making them feel known and seen and appreciated over time, and there's a lot of growth potential there.
Yeah, what
we already have in our hands.
That's what's awesome. Just sitting there hearing you, think about how far you've come. But I say this about our business all the time too. I'm like, on a scale of a 1 to 10, we're at like a 4 or 5 of where I think we can be. So just even hearing that, it's like
Cody,
exciting.
Let me just riff on that for a second. Absolutely. Like, we're in the second inning.
Yep.
I saw, and people should it's a fascinating visual. If you look at the 27 or 28 year stock chart of Amazon, the first 20 years, just go into Yahoo Finance and pop it in, like, all time. The first 20 years are a straight line. And had Bezos left in year 20, he would have left 93% of the value unrealized. He created 7% of the market cap in 2 decades. And then 93% in the last, 7 or 8 years.
It's crazy.
So I really feel like the best is yet to come. And, you've got to build the machine. You have to learn a lot. You have to make a lot of mistakes. But, we've raised about $700 million now. This is a fraction of what I thought we would have raised by now. It's a fraction of what I think we should have raised. So I'm not, looking back saying like, oh my gosh, I never thought we'd have $100 million year. I thought we'd have $100 million year like 8 years ago. I thought we'd be at $1 billion this year. There's so much capital out there. There are so many resources out there. I mean, Cody, there's more than $100 billion parked right now in donor advised funds.
Yep.
Literally latent money that is saving no lives, helping no hungry children, helping no refugees, helping nobody get clean water, but is hoping to earn, 8 to 12%, right? In the S&P, or, and then maybe 4% goes out or 5% goes out. So I think there's an opportunity, and that is our fault for not being compelling enough with our storytelling and with our value propositions and our organizations. We should be dumping the buckets of those donor advised funds, and compelling people to go and put more in because they're so excited with the capital that moves from being inert to literally transforming people's lives in real and tangible ways around the world. So yeah, I'm generally massively frustrated with, there's the 15 million people we've helped. It's 1/50th of the global problem currently. And we're 4 times bigger than the second biggest water charity. So like, no one else is coming. So we're small, the whole sector's small, and there's 771 million people that are waiting for us to get our act together and, grow the movement and attract more capital.
So one thing, all my advisor friends who listen to this podcast, if you're managing those donor advised funds, go look up Charity Water and let's empty those donor advised funds and fund more of what they're doing. But then I think
it's the vision, right?
Yep.
I think it's more the vision of, less accumulation of charitable capital and more deployment of charitable capital.
Yep. I love
right?
that.
It's like, a lot of people kind of hold on to it their whole lives, and there are people that have needs right now, Cody. Like, people are suffering. I mean, you turn on the TV, pick up a newspaper, you pick the issue, whether it's us, whether it's, the refugee crisis, that's just going to get worse and worse. Like, capital can relieve human suffering. And there are a lot of great organizations out there who have built, transparent machines to do that.
And I think what you're starting to see is so many people are realizing that they would rather see the impact of that while they're alive than when they're gone.
Gains on a
when they're
spreadsheet.
gone, right? And I think but I'll tie it into because of all the advisors that listen to this show. I think if we as advisors do our job well of making sure people know that they're going to have enough money that's going to last and they're going to be okay, that then they're free to give more away. It's just a cool way to live out kind of that last phase of your life, is make sure that you're giving away and impacting a lot of people and get to see that. So let me ask you one final question, and then I just want to jump into some of these quick lightning round questions just to make sure we hit kind of our time we've got allotted. As you look back over those 17 years, are there any big things that you have learned that you maybe say a different way, things that you wish you would have done differently?
Yeah, our data's a mess. I mean, it's a really boring answer, but we did not invest in the systems and the architecture and the CRM that would have made us a lot more successful. I'm much more of a creative kind of futurist. I'm not really a systematic, process-driven thinker. And I did not get those people and resource them early enough. I mean, there was a point where we had like 1 million donors on like Excel spreadsheets. Wow. I mean, it was just, we didn't have that one view of a supporter. So that has held us back. We're now doing that work now. It's costlier doing that work at scale. I mean, we've been doing it over the last few years as we've matured, but had we done that earlier, had we resourced it, we'd be in a much better place.
It's
and by the way, like when you're young, it's hard, spending $200,000 on a Salesforce integration when you're like, that's 4 people for a year, they can work alongside us and grow the movement.
Well, I'm guessing every advisor who's listened to this has had, some are probably in that situation, right, where they haven't done the data well. But I always say, like, man, the longer you put it off, the more the problem compounds, as you've probably realized as you've grown over that.
So take it from me, big learning.
Okay, let me ask you, these are just 5 questions I ask
The other
everyone.
one is not thinking big enough. Maybe this is helpful for your advisors, but, I thought pretty big. I would ask for 1 million, but there was 10 there.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would ask for 10 million and there was more there. So I used to kind of think, just this one story kind of sums it up for me. Often fundraisers, and maybe there's a parallel to your advisors, but, we feel like if we ask for too much, we're going to offend the other person. And I remember sitting in San Francisco with a Goldman partner once, and I was about to make a $12 million ask a few days later in Hawaii. And I'm like, I'm really nervous about this. I mean, I know that the family has the capacity to do this, but like I've never sat down and asked anyone for $12 million before. And I said, so when you and your wife have been asked for like a really big gift, right? Like order of magnitude than what you've given to the org or what you're giving, how does it make you feel? And he said, flattered. I said, what do you mean? I thought you would say offended. He said, well, I'm flattered that they think I would be that generous. And then I often go and I talk to my wife and say, why aren't we that generous? Because if they've done the research, they know I can give it. Mm-hmm. What would it take for us to give a transformative gift like that? So, that's another thing that I didn't go for it enough. And recently I've started going for it and it's working. I think there's a boldness sometimes. And if your advisors really believe that the culture of, their shop and the products that they're offering, go ask big, go big.
That's good. I love it. Great advice. Okay, let me ask you these because I know we've got a hard stop here in about 10 minutes. So kind of lightning round questions, just quick answers. As you look back over the past, 2 years, we're now, good 2 years into kind of COVID and everything that's happened. Is there one lesson that you've learned over these past 2 years that you're going to carry forward for the rest of your life?
I certainly don't need to be on as many planes and as in many in-person meetings. I went from about 100 flights a year to 0, like a lot of us. And a lot of awesome work got done. And I was able to spend a lot more time with my family, and the relationship I have with my kids is so different today. And I'm really favoring that. It's just a lot harder to get me on a plane
Yeah.
these days, and I think that's true for a lot of people. Then the extension of that is, okay, how can I really be the most precise and strategic with my time?
Yep.
If I jump on that plane and I go talk to 5,000 people, what is the likely outcome? Or if I take those 2 or 3 days and I work on something else that could have, an order of magnitude greater impact. What can I uniquely contribute to our mission? And then how do I align my time and my schedule to uniquely contribute in that way?
It's great.
And it's just a lot of activity before.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that sounds cool.
I'll do it.
I'll go speak there. I've never been to Norway, never been to, right. And then, you're like 3 days later, you're just exhausted. You're on a red eye. My wife is like, okay, well, you're doing breakfast and school drop off and school pickup and baseball, and piano lessons. And I'm like, but I just slept 3 hours on the plane and I just had 16 meetings in 2 days. Like, I'm so tired,
That's a great, I think a lot of people realize, right, there's a trade-off to everything you do. So being very intentional about how you're investing your time is one of those. So what's the one thing that you feel like you've done to graduate from being good as, I'll say, as the CEO of Charity Water to great in that role?
I think staying optimistic and staying the course. There's so many times I wanted to quit over the years, and just picking yourself up from the disappointments, from the challenges, and continuing that, 28-year march, right? And believing that there is a breakthrough coming, that, we are in the second inning, that the best is yet to come. So I think it's probably just determination. It's really hard. It's really discouraging at times.
Is there anything you're doing this year to drive your own personal growth that you're excited about?
We just moved from Manhattan after 26 years to Tennessee. We're outside of Nashville now. And we are more involved in church and community and kind of small group than we ever have been before. And that's been really healthy for, my marriage and our family, to be quite honest. That also, was never possible before with the travel schedule. I would have missed 80% of Sundays or, kind of small group, right? So that feels really good and really healthy for us, just to have kind of close friends that we're doing life with and that we're seeing, versus myriad acquaintances all over the world that you see a couple times a year.
That's great. Okay, fourth question. Besides your book, right, which everyone should pick up, is there one book that you've recommended the most to other friends, entrepreneurs, leaders?
Yeah. I'll give you two. I love Getting Things Done by David Allen, which I probably handed out the most. And for me, I'm just like, I like lists. It's got to get out of my brain. It has to get organized to get done. So I've just found that such a practical business book of productivity. And then probably the second one on the spiritual kind of kick is this book called Sacred Fire by Ronald Rolheiser that I've given away many, many times. And it's really first half of life and second half of life, and, moving from finding your identity and significance to then how do you be useful, kind of giving away that knowledge and mentorship. And I think it's an awesome book.
Well, and I think for all the advisors that listen, that'd be a great book to pick up, and probably is, because so many of them are helping people make that transition into retirement. What a great book to share with those clients. Okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Way more important than whatever you're doing is how you're doing it. Put integrity above everything else in your life.
It's awesome. Love it. Scott, this has been inspiring. I appreciate I just not what you're doing, but how you're doing it and what you stand for. So for everyone that listens, how can they get involved, connect with you online, support the mission of Charity Water?
Yeah, sure. charitywater.org is a great place to go. And then the spring, which we talked about, is thespring.com. There's a great video there, which is the story. So if they wanted to share it with, a client or a friend or their kids, thespring.com is a great place to go. And we can use the help. I mean, again, there's so many people out there that we know how to help, and we just haven't yet figured out how to attract the capital. But I think we're doing it, and it's going to happen.
You're on the path, man. It's inspiring. I appreciate you taking the time, and everyone should go check out what you're doing there. It's pretty incredible.
Awesome. Well, thanks for letting me share the story.
Thank you.